The storm had been building since Tuesday. By 11 p.m. on Route 9, it had become something else entirely, not weather, but a verdict. Trees down every quarter mile. No signal. No other headlights in either direction. James Calloway had driven this road 1,000 times. He knew every curve. He knew exactly how long it took to get Zoe home, fed, and asleep before exhaustion made him useless. 6 years of single fatherhood had turned him into a man who ran on systems, routines, no surprises. Then his headlights caught the guardrail. A silver sedan, nose first into the embankment, driver's door hanging open. He almost kept driving. For one full second, he almost kept driving. He didn't. She was conscious.
What's my name?
Barely. Her hand found his sleeve before he even knelt down, fingers locking like she'd been waiting for anyone, to stop. Save me, please. He reached for his phone. No signal. He looked back at the road. Blocked. He looked at his car, where Zoe sat pressed against the window, breath fogging the glass. Her voice came muffled through it. Dad, she looks like Mom. James went very still. He wasn't a hero. He'd never claimed to be. But he was a father, and his daughter had just said the one thing in the English language he had absolutely no defense against. He lifted the woman into his arms and carried her to the truck. He still didn't know her name. It was 10:47 p.m. when James Calloway finally pointed the truck toward home. He'd been on his feet since 5 that morning, a warehouse shift that started before the sun, then 4 hours at the machine parts depot on Route 4, then back to his own garage for whatever work had come in during the day. His uniform still carried the dust from the afternoon load. His boots had been wet since noon and hadn't dried. On the passenger seat sat a plastic bag from the 24-hour convenience store 3 blocks from Zoe's cousin's house, 2 rice bowls, a chocolate milk, a packet of crackers he'd probably eat in the driveway because he was too tired to walk all the way to the kitchen. Dinner. Diet. Technically. On the dashboard, taped above the heating vent where it had lived for 2 years, was a drawing in red crayon. A sun with 4 uneven rays. 2 stick figures underneath, one tall, one small. Below them, in the handwriting of a child still learning that letters had rules, Dad me. He looked at it every time he hit a red light. There weren't many red lights at this hour. He looked at it anyway. Zoe was asleep in the back seat, head tipped against the window, mouth slightly open, hair still damp from the bath her cousin had given her. She was 6 years old, and she slept the way 6-year-olds sleep, completely, without reservation, trusting the world to hold still until she was ready for it again. James drove and listened to her breathe and thought about nothing in particular, which was the closest he got to rest these days. The rain started 20 minutes from home. Light at first, then, without much warning, not light at all. The sky opened the way it sometimes did in October, all at once, as if it had been holding something back for weeks, and finally stopped bothering. Branches whipped across the road. Water sheeted over the asphalt in shallow, fast-moving rivers. James slowed down, gripped the wheel with both hands, and leaned forward slightly, as if the extra inch would help him see. His jaw tightened without him deciding to tighten it. He knew this kind of rain. He knew what it looked like from the other side of it, from the side where you were the one waiting for headlights that never came. 4 years ago, on a night not unlike this one, Sarah's car had gone off Route 9 in the rain. By the time anyone stopped, it had been too late. Not because the impact was unsurvivable. Because no one had stopped in time. 3 cars had passed. He knew because the police report said so, and he had read that report more times than he could count, looking for something in it that wasn't there. He never drove past anyone broken down on the side of the road. Not once. Not ever. That was the rule he had made himself, quietly, without telling anyone, in the months after the funeral. It was the only rule that had never wavered. This was just Tuesday. Tuesday in October. One of about 200 nights, exactly like it. He was used to managing alone. He had been managing alone for 4 years, since the accident that took Sarah, a collision that took 3 seconds and rearranged everything that came after. James had learned, in the time since, to make himself into a system. Predictable. Efficient. All. No room for surprises, because surprises had a cost he couldn't always afford. The perimeter was small. Him and Zoe, and the drawing on the dashboard. That was enough. That was what he told himself, on nights like this one. His headlights found the guardrail first. Then the silver sedan, nose first into the embankment, driver's door hanging open, the windshield spiderwebbed on the passenger side. James braked. He sat for a moment looking at it through the rain. Nobody else on the road. No headlights in either direction. A tree down across the lane behind him. He could see her through the broken window. A woman, slumped against the door frame, not moving. The details registered one by one. A cashmere coat the color of sand, soaked through. One heel still on. A leather bag on the floor of the passenger side. The kind of bag James had only ever seen in the glass cases of stores he'd never walked into. She was not from his world. He reached for his phone. No signal. He tried 911 anyway. Static. D. He looked at the road back to town, the fallen tree he'd passed a quarter-mile back. No way through without a chainsaw. He sat in the truck with the engine running and the rain hammering the roof. 3 cars had passed Sarah that night. 3D. He knew the number because he had read the police report until the paper softened at the folds. He had spent a long time trying to understand what kind of person kept driving. What calculation they ran in the 3 seconds it took to see a car on its side and decide it was someone else's problem. He had never found an answer that satisfied him. He had only found the rule. The quiet one he'd made himself, somewhere in the months after the funeral, never spoken aloud because saying it out loud would mean acknowledging what it cost him to need it. He never drove past. He never drove past, and he wasn't going to start tonight. A voice from the back seat, sleepy and small. "Dad, she looks like Mom." James turned around. Zoe was awake, pressed against the window, looking at the woman in the wrecked car with the wide, serious eyes she got when something mattered. He turned back to the windshield. Something moved through his chest. Not grief exactly, not anymore. Something older and quieter than grief. The particular weight of a man who has already lost the thing he was most afraid of losing, and who understands, because of that, exactly what it means when no one stops. He turned off the engine, opened the door, stepped out into the storm. The woman weighed less than he expected. James had her arm over his shoulder, her head tilted against his neck, her breathing shallow but present. She said something once, 2 words, barely shaped, lost in the rain. He didn't catch them. He kept moving. Zoe had climbed into the back without being asked, pulling her knees up to make room, watching everything with the careful eyes of a child who understood that questions could wait. He drove with one hand for the first stretch, the other pressed against the woman's shoulder to keep her upright. Left on Granger, right on Mill, the long, straight stretch on Holbrook, where the headlights finally had room to reach. He knew these roads the way he knew his own floor plan, not because he'd memorized them, but because he'd driven them tired, in the dark, in all kinds of weather, for 4 years. His house was small, and it was his. 5 porch steps he'd been meaning to repaint. A door that stuck in humidity. A kitchen where the lights came on warm the moment he hit the switch. He carried her inside. Zoe held the door without being asked. He set her down on the couch and stood back and looked at her. This woman in a soaked cashmere coat in the middle of his living room, breathing alive here because he had stopped. He didn't feel like a hero. He didn't feel much of anything yet, except the particular exhaustion of a man who has been running on obligation for so long that even the right decisions feel like weight. He had not stopped because of the rule. Not entirely. He had stopped because 3 cars had passed Sarah, and he was not going to be the 4th. This is just overnight, he told himself. Storm clears, lines come back, then she goes. That's all this is. He almost believed it. He went to get the first aid kit. James Calloway owned 4 things worth keeping. His truck, a 2009 Ford with a cracked dashboard and 190,000 miles on it. His tools organized in a red metal cabinet in the garage, with a precision that bordered on religious. His late wife's cardigan, folded in the back of his closet behind the winter coats, where Zoe wouldn't find it and he wouldn't have to explain. And the drawing on the dashboard, a sun with 4 crooked rays, 2 stick figures underneath, Dad Me written in red crayon in the handwriting of a 6-year-old who still capitalized random letters. He looked at it every time he hit a red light. It was the only art he'd ever owned. He had worked 2 jobs since Sarah died, a morning shift at a machine parts warehouse on Route 4, and whatever mechanical work came through his garage in the evenings. He wasn't behind on anything. He wasn't ahead of anything either. He existed in the careful middle ground of a man who has learned to want exactly what he has, because wanting more is how you notice what's missing. He got the first aid kit from under the bathroom sink, olive green, government surplus, bought at a yard sale the year Zoe started walking. He had gauze. He had antiseptic. He clicked on a small flashlight and held it between his teeth while he examined the gash above the woman's right temple. His hands were steady. Almost. There was a faint tremor in his left hand, the one holding the gauze, the hand that hadn't done this in 4 years, not since he'd walked away from search and rescue to be home every night for a little girl who needed at least one parent she could count on. He pressed it firm and told himself it was the cold. It wasn't the cold. It was the feeling of muscle memory waking up in a body that had tried very hard to put it to sleep. She woke 3 hours later and didn't know her name. James was in the kitchen when he heard it, not a scream, something quieter. The sharp intake of breath a person makes when they surface from somewhere dark and aren't sure yet which world they've arrived in. He stood in the doorway. She was upright on the couch, both hands pressed to the cushions, scanning the room with the focused attention of someone counting exits. Her eyes found him. Didn't soften. "You're okay," he said. "You were in an accident." She touched the bandage at her temple with 2 fingers, light and exploratory, the way you touch something you're not sure is real. "What's my name?" she said. Not a question. A test. She already suspected the answer. "I was hoping you could tell me that." Her jaw tightened. She looked at the window, dark, rain still going, then at the door. "Don't," James said. "Your ankle's sprained. You won't get 10 feet." She looked back at him. Behind her eyes, something was calculating, working the room, working him, assessing without enough information to conclude. Even with a head wound and no memory, some part of her was still running. "Who are you?" she said. "James Calloway. I found you on Route 9. He paused. "You asked me not to take you to a hospital." Something moved through her face. Fast, involuntary, Daddy. Her shoulders dropped 1 inch and then caught themselves. "I said that?" 3 times. She didn't ask why. That was the thing that stayed with him later. She didn't question it. She accepted it, the way you accept something your body already knows, even when your mind has gone quiet. The survival reflex ran deeper than memory. Whatever had been taken from her, her nervous system still understood that a hospital meant being located, and being located meant danger. She couldn't have explained it. She didn't need to. "Is there someone I can call?" he asked. She looked at her hands for a long moment. A pale line on her left ring finger, a tan line, or a permanent indent. No ring. "I don't know," she said. Zoe found her in the morning. James came out of the shower to find his daughter sitting cross-legged on the floor in front of the couch, 2 feet from the sleeping woman, watching her with the grave focus of a scientist observing something unprecedented. "Zoe died," She's breathing different than us, Zoe said without looking up. Slower. Come, have breakfast. Does she have a family? He didn't answer. Zoe read his face the way she'd learned to, for what wasn't being said. She went and had breakfast, but she left her juice cup on the floor near the couch, handle turned outward, within easy reach. James noticed. He didn't move it. The woman woke properly mid-morning. James gave her water and toast, and they sat across from each other at the kitchen table and had the conversation, methodical, careful, the way you speak to someone standing on uncertain ground. She remembered language. She remembered, James noticed, how to be comfortable taking up space, reaching past him for the salt without asking, the unconscious ease of someone accustomed to having things be where she reached for them. She knew how to hold a room, even a kitchen in a stranger's house, even with a bandaged head and borrowed clothes. That told him something he filed away without examining. I'll take you to the police when the road clears, he said. They can help find your family. She rubbed the pale line on her ring finger with her thumb. Okay, she said. Just that, with the tone of someone agreeing to a plan they suspect won't go the way it's been described. It was Zoe who named her. She announced it at lunch, setting down her fork with the certainty of someone closing a matter. Her name is Anna, until she remembers the real one. James looked at his daughter. Anna was Mom's middle name, Zoe said, as if this were obvious, as if it explained everything. She looks like someone who should have a name like that. The woman looked at Zoe for a long moment. Something moved through her face, not recognition, but resonance. A frequency, faintly familiar. Anna, she said quietly, testing it. Okay. James watched her say it. He watched her notice, a moment later, that Zoe's glass was on the wrong side of the plate for a left-handed child, and reach over, without thinking, and move it left. Zoe didn't notice. James did. The bond between Zoe and Anna didn't announce itself. It assembled quietly, the way certain things do, through proximity and repetition, and small acts that nobody planned. Zoe was methodical about it, in the way of a child who has learned to be careful with things she wants. She began with observation, sitting near, watching, asking nothing directly. She brought Anna a glass of water without being asked. She showed her the crayon drawings pinned above her headboard, not saying much, just holding them up one by one. Anna looked at each one seriously. She didn't perform enthusiasm. She just looked, and occasionally said something specific. I like how you made the sky 2 different blues. And Zoe would nod, solemn and satisfied, as if a verdict had been delivered by someone qualified to give it. The second day, Anna picked up Zoe's hairbrush from the coffee table and, without speaking, began working through a tangle at the back of Zoe's hair. Her hands moved in a particular way, sections first, then long strokes from root to end, the technique of someone who had done this 10,000 times in a life she couldn't currently access. It was the exact way Sarah used to do it. Zoe went completely still. She stared at the wall. Her eyes went glassy, and she blinked once, slowly, and didn't move. Anna didn't notice. Her hands kept moving, certain and unhurried. James stood in the doorway and didn't go in. There was nothing to say. There was nothing to do but let it be what it was. That evening, during the storm's second round of rain, thunder rolled low over the neighborhood. Anna was on the couch reading. Zoe appeared in the doorway of the living room in her pajamas, pillow under her arm, expression carefully neutral. I can't sleep, she said. Anna looked at her. Then she moved over on the couch, one wordless shift, making room. Zoe climbed up, tucked herself against Anna's side, and was asleep within minutes. Anna sat very still with Zoe's weight against her. She looked at the window. She looked at the rain. Something passed through her face that James, watching from the hallway, couldn't fully name. He went to bed. He stared at the ceiling for a while. He thought about doors left open. The TV was on when it happened. James was making dinner. Nothing deliberate about it, just the news running in the background the way it always did, the sound of the world reminding him it existed. Anna was at the kitchen table with a 3-month-old car magazine, feet tucked under her, a mug of tea going cold at her elbow. The anchor's voice shifted tone, that particular shift that means the story is bigger than the ones around it. CEO, Caroline Clark missing, following financial scandal. Shareholders demanding investigation. Authorities asking for information from anyone who may have. James stopped moving. He looked at the screen. The photograph, a woman in a navy blazer, hair back, standing in front of a glass building with Clark Industries in brushed steel lettering above the entrance. Controlled. Professional. The practiced ease of someone who had spent years learning exactly how to be seen. He looked at the kitchen table. Anna was still reading. Or pretending to. The magazine hadn't turned a page in several minutes. He looked at the TV again. The jawline. The angle of the nose. The way she held her shoulders even now, even in borrowed clothes with a bandage on her head. A particular posture that photographs didn't invent. He put the spoon down. He said nothing. He finished making dinner. He called Zoe. The three of them ate and Anna laughed at something Zoe said about her teacher, a real laugh, surprised out of her, and James kept eating and said nothing at all. But afterward, alone at the sink, he stood for a long time. He had brought a stranger into this house. He had let his daughter close to her, closer than he'd let anyone in 4 years. He had done it because of 6 words through a rain-fogged window, and he had told himself that was just one night, just the storm, just until the road cleared. The doubt moving through him now was not about Anna. It was about himself. About the part of him that had wanted a reason to stop. Any reason at all. He turned off the kitchen light. He didn't call the police. He went to bed, and in the morning he sat in the armchair before anyone else was up, phone in hand, and typed Caroline Clark CEO into the search bar. 47,000 result. He read until he found what he needed, a profile piece, 18 months old. A single line buried in the 4th paragraph. Clark, who has a small birthmark behind her left ear. She jokes is her factory setting. Said she never planned to run a company this size. He put the phone down. He waited until Zoe was at school. Anna was at the kitchen table when he came in. She was doing the thing she'd taken to in quiet moments, arranging small objects, a pen and a salt shaker and a folded piece of paper, her hands solving problems her mind didn't have names for yet. James sat across from her. He placed his phone on the table, screen up, the news photograph facing her. "I think I know who you are," he said. She looked at the phone without reaching for it. A long moment passed. "I don't recognize her," she said. "The birthmark, behind your left ear." Her hand moved, 2 fingers touching the spot, involuntary, immediately stopped. "The article describes it," James said. "I didn't invent that." She looked at the photograph again. The woman in the boardroom, standing in front of the building she'd built. She looked at it the way you look at a photograph of a city you've never been to, recognizing the genre without recognizing the place. "She looks like someone who knows what she's doing," Anna said quietly. "Yeah, but I don't feel like that." "I know." The refrigerator hummed. A car passed outside and her shoulders moved. A small brace, caught and released. "The news says you embezzled money," James said. 40 million, that you caused the accident running from an investigation." She considered it the way you consider a sentence in a language you're still translating. "Do you believe that?" she asked. The honest answer took longer than he expected. "No," he said. She looked at him then, fully, with the complete attention of someone who, whatever else had been taken, had not lost the ability to read a room. "Why not?" Because people running from something don't move through a house the way you do. He paused. And because guilty people don't look that lost when you show them the accusation. Something in her jaw found its position. I still don't know what I did or didn't do, she said. I know. That's not what I'm deciding. Then what are you deciding? Whether to hand you to a system I don't control based on a news report I can't verify. He pulled the phone back. I'm not doing that. He stood up and rinsed his glass and went back to the garage. And he stood at his workbench for a long time, looking at the wall, thinking about the fact that he had just made a decision he could not explain with logic, and finding somewhat to his surprise that it didn't feel wrong. 4 days after the storm, a neighbor noticed. Mrs. Carter lived at number 12, directly across the street, 62, retired, possessed of strong opinions about everything visible from her front window. She had seen Anna through the parted curtains of James's living room on a morning when he'd forgotten to close them all the way. She had watched the evening news. She had made a connection. She knocked at 8:15, carrying a covered plate she didn't intend to leave. Saw you had company, she said, smiling in the way that meant the smile was a tool. Old friend, James said, passing through. She looked familiar somehow. She gets that a lot, James said, and closed the door with exactly enough politeness to not be rude about it. He stood in the hallway. Then he went and closed every curtain on the ground floor. Anna was at the top of the stairs, watching him. She'd heard. He looked up at her and she looked down at him, and neither spoke, but something settled between them, an acknowledgement that the world outside the door was awake and paying attention. That evening, James found that Mrs. Carter had called the missing persons tip line, the one with a reward attached. She hadn't meant harm, probably. She'd meant the money and called it civic duty. But by morning, someone with access to the regional camera network had a neighborhood and a street and a direction to look. The clock, though neither James nor Anna knew it yet, had started. Mark Reeves arrived on a Tuesday morning, 6 days after the storm. To understand what Mark Reeves's arrival meant, you had to understand what Mark Reeves was, which was, on paper, the chief financial officer of Clark Industries, the second name on the organizational chart, the man who had spent 11 years standing one step behind Caroline Clark while she built the company that made both of them wealthy. He was 51 years old. He had a law degree he never practiced, and an MBA he used constantly. He had a way of entering rooms that suggested he had already mapped them. He came alone. Black sedan, unhurried pace. A coat that cost more than James's monthly rent. He walked up the driveway with his hands visible, relaxed, unthreatening. In the manner of a man who understood that the appearance of transparency was its own form of control. James was under the hood of the truck when he heard the car pull up. He straightened slowly. He didn't put the hood down. Mr. Calloway. Not a question, he already knew. I don't know who you are, James said. Mark Reeves, CFO, Clark Industries. The smile arrived, measured, deployed at exactly the right moment. I believe you may have encountered our CEO recently. I don't know what you're talking about. Of course. The smile held its position. I wanted to be transparent with you. Caroline Clark is not well. She's been under investigation for serious financial misconduct, $40 million of shareholder funds, redirected over 18 months. He opened a leather folio and placed a document on the hood of the truck. She's unwell and we're very concerned about her safety, and yours. James looked at the document without touching it. We'd like to help her get the treatment she needs, Mark said, and we'd like to compensate you for your trouble. He named a number. James said nothing. He counted 6 seconds of silence. Then Mark said gently, with the tone of a man stating a geographical fact, harboring a fugitive carries serious legal consequences, especially for a single parent. A slight tilt of the head. I imagine Zoe's school is about 2 miles from here. It was exactly 2 miles. James had never said his daughter's name. Something happened in his chest, below the level of thought, in the place where a father keeps the things he cannot afford to lose. He looked at this man with his leather folio, and his careful smile, this man who had arrived knowing things he should not have known, and he felt something clarify. Innocent men didn't need to know where 6-year-olds went to school. He picked up the document. He looked at it for a moment. He handed it back. I think you should leave, James said. Mark took the document. The smile didn't shift. Think it over, he said. I'll be nearby. James watched the sedan turn the corner. He stood in the driveway until it was gone. Then he went inside, and Anna was at the top of the stairs, and she had seen through the window, and her hand on the banister had gone white at the knuckles. That was Mark Reeves, she said. Flat. Certain. You remember him? A long pause. Her eyes were somewhere else for a moment. Not yet, she said. But I know him. The memory came back 2 days later, through a door Zoe opened by accident. She'd been looking for her drawing tutorial on James's laptop, the one about horses, which she had watched 11 times and intended to watch again. She clicked the wrong folder. A recorded business conference opened, a man's voice filling the room mid-sentence, something about quarterly restructuring. Anna was on the couch. Her book was open. She wasn't reading it. And the Clark Industries portfolio is on schedule for... Anna stopped breathing. Not dramatically. The exhale simply didn't finish. Her hand went flat on the cushion beside her. Her eyes traveled somewhere the room couldn't follow. Zoe looked at her. Are you okay? Anna didn't answer. A conference room. Cold air, white light, the kind of cold produced deliberately to make a room feel important. A glass table. 8 faces she knew without being able to name. A contract, 40 pages, tab. She turned to page 12 without thinking, her hands moving before the instruction arrived. Numbers. A chain of transactions running through 4 countries, arriving clean in accounts that no quarterly audit reached first. A voice, close and familiar. Just sign it, Caroline. It's already done. Across the table, a man with a measured smile. The same man who had stood in a driveway 2 days ago with a leather folio and a coat that cost too much. She looked at the contract. She looked at him. This isn't restructuring. Sign it. She stood up. Her chair scraped back. 8 pairs of eyes. I'm taking this to the board. Mark's smile didn't change. That was the thing. It didn't change at all. It simply recalibrated, the way a compass needle recalibrates when you move it to a new position. A man revising his plan in real time, so smoothly you almost missed that the previous one had just ended. She came back to the living room. Zoe was standing in front of her, cereal spoon still in hand. Anna, Zoe's voice was very careful. Can you hear me? Anna looked at her. At this small, serious face, Sarah's eyes in a smaller face, the same patient attention. Can you get your dad? Anna said. She sat with it that night. She didn't tell James immediately. She needed the hours first, needed to let the knowledge settle into her before she tried to carry it in front of someone else. She sat at the window while the house went quiet, while Zoe's light went out upstairs, while James moved through the kitchen and then stopped moving. She had a name. She had a company. She had 11 years of building something, and one man who had decided that what she'd built was more useful to him as a vehicle than as a business. She had been put into a ditch on Route 9. She sat with that too. By morning she was ready. James sat across from her at the kitchen table, and she told him everything, in order, methodically, the way her mind naturally organized things even when her hands were shaking slightly under the table where he couldn't see. the contract, the shell companies, the transactions on page 12. Standing up from the table, Mark's face. "My name is Caroline Clark," she said. "I built Clark Industries for 11 years, and Mark Reeves has been moving money through it for at least 3 Why?" She met his eyes. "Before the accident, when I first found the discrepancy, I made copies. Every transaction record, every internal memo, every transfer chain. I encrypted the files under a false name and stored them in a cloud account completely outside the company system. Can you access it? If Mark tries to delete it, it triggers an automatic audit notification to the SEC. He can't touch the files without setting off every alarm he controls." A pause. "But he doesn't need to delete them. He just needs to make sure no one believes me before I can present them. Then we go to the police." "We can't. No hesitation. Without me accessing the account and presenting the data directly, they're encrypted files attached to a name no one will recognize. And the local department." She stopped. "Mark knew your address, your daughter's name, her school. He had all of that before he knocked on your door, and he didn't get it from your neighbor." "Meaning he has access to someone inside." "Meaning we can't walk into a building he may have reached first." She turned her hands over on the table, looking at them as if reacquainting herself with them. "We need to get into the account and send the data to people Mark can't touch. A journalist, independent legal counsel, the SEC directly. The SEC directly." "What's stopping you?" "3-layer authentication. I have the first 2. Something tightened briefly in her voice. "The third is a passphrase I set the night before the accident. Something personal. Something I wrote for myself." She shook her head. "I can't find it yet. It's there. I know it's there, but I can't." "It'll come back," James said. She looked at him. "The rest came back," he said. "This will too." He said it the way he said everything, without decoration, without hedging. She understood by now that this was not a habit of simplicity. It was the opposite. He only said what he believed, which meant that when he said something, it meant something. Her throat tightened. She looked away. "If you want me to leave..." "You're not leaving." "James..." "Where would you go?" He said it quietly. He called Zoe's school. "That doesn't stop if you walk out. It only stops if we end this." She pressed both palms to the table and breathed out slowly. "Okay," she said. James put the kettle on. Caroline sat in the kitchen in his late wife's old cardigan. She didn't know that's what it was, and he hadn't told her, and watched the window and thought about a sentence she had written for herself in the dark on the last night she was certain of anything. It was in there somewhere. She just needed to find it before Mark found them. The call from Zoe's school came on a Wednesday morning. James was under a neighbor's Civic, $20 cash for an oil change, the kind of work that kept the edges even, when his phone buzzed on the concrete floor. Millbrook Elementary. He picked up on the second ring. The vice principal's voice was careful, measured. Someone had called that morning, she explained, asking questions about a child in their care, expressing concerns about the home environment, about stability, about whether the appropriate authorities had been made aware of the situation. James lay under the car and looked at the chassis above him. "Thank you for telling me," he said. He slid out, wiped his hands, drove home without the radio on. Caroline had found the post before he got back. She held the laptop out without a word. A photograph of the house, the street number on the mailbox, clear as anything. The headline, "Local man allegedly sheltering fugitive CEO, sources say police involvement imminent." 47 shares. Comments asking for the address. James read it standing in the hallway, still in his jacket. He handed it back, walked to the sink, looked out at the yard, the fence panel he'd been meaning to fix, The oak tree Zoe had claimed as her reading spot, the ordinary geography of a life he'd assembled carefully from what the last 4 years had left him. His hands found the edge of the sink. Mark wasn't trying to silence Caroline anymore. That wasn't the play, or not the only one. The play was to make the story about James, the unreliable single father, the man making bad decisions, the person no jury of neighbors would believe when he stood up and said she's innocent. I was there. Destroy the witness. Make him the story. Caroline came into the kitchen behind him and stopped a few feet back. I'll go, she said. Whatever happens to me. Stop. I. James. Where? But. He turned around. Where would you go? She didn't answer. He called Zoe's school. Her school. That doesn't stop the minute you walk out. He looked at her. So we finish it. That night, he sat on the edge of Zoe's bed. She wasn't asleep. She was never a convincing pretender, even as a toddler. He sat with the nightlight, and the drawings on the walls, and the constellation map they'd made together 2 winters ago, each star a pushpin. I know you're awake, he said. She rolled over, Sarah's eyes looking up at him. Is Anna going to be okay? She asked. I'm working on it. Is she in danger? He considered the small protective lie, found he couldn't locate it. Yes, he said. Zoe was quiet for a moment, processing, weighing. She needs help, Dad, she said. That's all. James looked at his daughter. 6 years old, 42 pounds, afraid of thunder, but constitutionally unwilling to admit it. She had her mother's eyes, and her mother's way of arriving at the center of things without taking the long road around. He had spent 4 years trying to protect her from the world outside their perimeter. He had not considered that she might already understand things he was still catching up to. Yeah, he said. She does. He kissed her forehead. She was asleep before he reached the door, actually asleep this time. 10 o'clock. Kitchen table. Laptop opened 80. Every curtain drawn, the armchair pushed against the front door, not enough to stop anyone serious, but enough to hear them coming. Zoe was upstairs. James had checked twice. Caroline's hands were steady as she typed. Whatever these last days had reassembled in her, it had found its load-bearing structure. She was someone James hadn't fully met before, not the disoriented woman on his couch, not the careful presence moving through his kitchen, learning the edges of a borrowed life. Someone more inhabited, more certain of her own dimensions. The first layer, the passphrase. 12 words, typed without pausing, hands moving ahead of conscious thought. Verified. The second layer, biometric. She leaned toward the camera and spoke a sentence in a clear, even voice. Verified. The third layer, a blinking cursor. Enter final authentication phrase. Her hands came off the keyboard. James watched her face, the particular stillness that meant she was somewhere far away, sifting. What were you thinking about, he said. That night, before the accident. Silence. You'd found the discrepancy. You decided to go to the board. You went home. He kept his voice level, no pressure in it. What were you thinking when you sat down and set that password? That if something happened before I could get there. She stopped. Her throat moved. I kept thinking about being alone in it, about the truth surviving me even if I didn't. She paused. And then I was thinking. She went very still. Her lips moved slightly, rehearsing something that wasn't words yet, more like the rhythm and shape of a sentence her mouth had formed once before and remembered. Then her hands returned to the keyboard, and she typed without looking at the keys, the way you write something you learned before you knew you were learning it. 14 words. A line from a journal she'd kept at 17. The year she first understood what it meant to want something larger than the life she'd been handed. A sentence she'd underlined 3 times and never read aloud to anyone. The truth doesn't need you to believe in it. It just needs to be found. The screen shifted. Access granted. The files were everything. 31 months of transaction records. Shell company registrations across 4 countries. Internal memos with Mark's name in the header. Wire transfers, moving through intermediaries, and arriving clean in accounts the quarterly audit never reached. $40 million, moved in increments, engineered to avoid automated flags by someone who understood exactly where the flags were placed. Caroline sat with it for a moment, with the particular stillness of a person looking at proof of something they already knew, feeling the difference between knowing and seeing. Then she opened 3 tabs. The investigative journalist she'd contacted 8 weeks before the accident, before she had everything, before she was fully certain, received the first message. 2 paragraphs, the files attached, and 1 line. This is what I told you I'd find. The second went to Clark Industries' independent legal counsel, the board-facing attorney who operated outside Mark's chain of authority. You'll want to read this tonight. The third, the SEC's financial fraud reporting portal, the one that logged submissions independently of any corporate infrastructure. She looked at James, her finger over the trackpad. Once I send this, she said, it doesn't stop. I know. Your name will be part of it. I know. She looked at him for a moment, not checking, not asking permission. Something else. The look of a person making sure they're not alone in a room before they do something that can't be undone. He nodded once. She pressed send. The upload bar appeared. The files were large. It moved, steadily. 40%. 60. 73. The router light on the shelf went out. Caroline's hand shot to the trackpad. The bar froze. Connection lost. The room went quiet in a particular way, not the quiet of nothing happening, but the quiet of something happening that hadn't been accounted for. James was already moving. Phone off the counter, hotspot settings open. 1 bar.shay. Wavering. He understood immediately, not the cell tower, the fixed line. Mark had contacted the provider and flagged the account. The cable connection to the house was suspended, but the mobile data ran on a different carrier, a different account entirely. 1 bar wasn't enough. The truck, he said. There's a ridge on Milner Road, higher ground, different angle to the tower. I use it when the signal's down here. He was already at the door. Bring the laptop. Zoe. 5 minutes. She's asleep. I'll lock the door. He looked at her. 5 minutes. They drove without headlights until they cleared his street. Caroline held the laptop with both hands, the upload window open, the bar still frozen. Milner Road was a dead end half a mile up the hill, cracked asphalt, no streetlights, used by no one in particular. James drove it from memory and stopped at the ridge. He held the phone up. 1 bar. He shifted position, moved toward the gap in the tree line, where the signal had always been marginally better. He'd discovered it 2 winters ago, pulled over in a snowstorm, trying to reach Zoe's school. He held the phone higher, angled left. 2 bars. Steady. Day. He thought about Route 9. About a phone that couldn't connect, and a woman in the rain, and a decision that didn't come from logic. Connect to my hotspot, he said. The laptop found the signal. The bar flickered, then resumed. 74%. 80. 87. Headlights at the base of the hill. A car turning onto Milner Road, moving slowly, deliberate. James watched it in the mirror. Said nothing. Didn't move. 92. The car stopped at the bottom of the hill. Engine running. Headlights on. Waiting. 96. Caroline was watching the screen with the absolute stillness of someone who had learned, over 11 years of building something in a world that didn't always want her to, that there were moments when the only useful thing was to hold your position and let the thing finish. 100. Upload complete. Files delivered to 3 recipients. The cursor blinked twice. Caroline closed her eyes. Just for a second. One breath in, one breath out. The car at the bottom of the hill reversed slowly and drove away. James lowered the phone. He sat with both hands on the wheel and let the air out of his lungs, long and even. "It's done," Caroline said. "Yeah," he said. They sat another moment at the top of Milner Road, the truck idling, the town below them, ordinary and quiet, entirely unaware of what had moved through it tonight. Then James put the truck in reverse and drove them home. Mark Reeves was detained 41 hours later. The journalist published first, documentation complete, sourced, the kind of piece that spreads fast because the evidence is already assembled and anyone who tries to dispute it has to dispute the records themselves. The CCEC announced a formal inquiry before noon. The Clark Industries board called an emergency session before close of business. By the time Mark's attorney arrived at the federal building, 3 other executives had separately retained their own counsel. The social media post about James came down quietly, replaced by a 2-line correction at low traffic. Easy to miss. James didn't miss it. The charges formalized in December: money laundering, conspiracy, and 1 count the news reported as criminal endangerment, which was the careful legal language for what had happened on Route 9 on a stormy Tuesday night. The board restructured. An independent audit ran through the company's books. Clark Industries kept running, because Caroline Clark had built it to keep running, even when she wasn't there. She came back on a Saturday morning in late autumn, the light low and golden, coming through the kitchen window at the angle that made the whole room look warmer than it was. She knocked. James had told her not to knock. She knocked anyway. Zoe opened the door. She looked at Caroline for 1 full second, the civilian clothes, no bandage, a small pink bakery box in her hands. "Anna," she said. Caroline looked at her. "I remember my name now." "I know," Zoe said. "You're still Anna, though." Then, she wrapped both arms around Caroline's waist and held on. Caroline stood very still for a moment, absorbing it, the particular weight of a child who has decided you are safe, who has given you the kind of trust that has no conditions attached to it. Then she held on. Both arms, properly, the way you hold something when you finally understand what it is. James stood in the kitchen doorway with a dish towel in his hand, and nowhere to be. They sat at the table, the 3 of them. Zoe and Caroline went through the bakery box with the systematic focus of a serious project. James made coffee. At some point, Caroline looked up and caught him watching. "Thank you," she said. It was inadequate, and they both knew it. But it was also true, said in the plain way he received it, not formality, not transaction. Just the thing itself, set down between them. "You'd have figured it out," he said. She considered it honestly. "Maybe. Eventually." He shrugged and poured the coffee. The logistics contract arrived in February, a company he didn't recognize, requesting long-term fleet maintenance. 12 vehicles serviced quarterly, rates he read twice. He checked the registration. Real, Del, Bean. He signed it. In March, a letter for Zoe from the Whitmore Educational Foundation. Full scholarship, beginning next fall. He read it at the kitchen counter while she ate breakfast. "What is it?" she asked. "Someone wants to pay for your school." "Who?" "It doesn't say." She seemed to accept this without difficulty, with the reasonable trust of a child who has learned that good things sometimes arrive without a return address. She went back to her cereal. James folded the letter and put it in the drawer where he kept the things worth keeping. The insurance coverage came in April, a quiet administrative notice that the family account had been updated, fully funded, no action required. He didn't ask. He knew. Why? That evening he sat in the armchair after Zoe went to bed, in the quiet he'd been keeping alone for 4 years. He thought about a perimeter, about how carefully he'd drawn it, and how thoroughly it had been crossed, and how the crossing hadn't destroyed anything, had left the interior larger than it was before. The sun drawing was still on the dashboard. Dad me. He'd been reading it at red lights for 3 years as an inventory, the exact dimensions of his world. 2 figures. Defined edges. He thought about how lately, when he stopped at it, he felt something different. Not smaller. Not the careful accounting of a man who has learned to want less. Just a sun with 4 crooked rays. Open sky in every direction. Plenty of room. He turned off the light and went to bed, and slept without the particular weight he had carried for so long, he'd stopped knowing it was there. Some doors don't open because you planned for them. They open because a storm forced you off the road. Because a child said something true in the dark. Because you were tired enough to stop pretending you could carry everything alone. James Calloway didn't set out to save anyone. He was just a man driving home after a long day, with dusty boots and a convenient store dinner and a crayon drawing on his dashboard that reminded him who he was doing all of it for. But sometimes the right thing and the hard thing arrive together, in the rain, wearing a cashmere coat. And sometimes the bravest version of you isn't the one who charges in without hesitation. It's the one who hesitates, feels the fear all the way down, and opens the door anyway. This story is about what happens when you let someone in. Not because it's safe. Not because you're certain. But because your daughter looks at you, and you realize protecting her and teaching her were never 2 different things. The walls we build to keep pain out have a way of keeping everything else out too. Let someone in. Even in the storm. Especially in the storm. If this story stayed with you, even just a little, drop a comment below and tell me what you felt. Was it James's quiet courage? Zoe's words in the dark? Or something you recognized in yourself? Stories like this one only reach the people who need them because of you. Your like, your share, the subscribe button you might be hovering over right now. Every one of those tells us to keep going, keep building, keep telling the stories worth telling. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next one.